The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Politico, the rag that Politico is, caught my attention in a glaring headline. White House regroups after McCarthy's debt ceiling success. And immediately my mind goes, who is writing this crap? Seriously, who would write that? Well, Politico. The rag that they are. Now, understand, they then go into the fact that, you know, the quote unquote success is not going to pass. It's not even really a piece of legislation. It's a proposal. But it's one of these things where, you know, the White House, they challenged the Republicans to come up with something, and they did. They gave them one task, and they did it. They've got a plan. Here's the thing. If I'm the Biden administration, maybe the regrouping is celebrating. Maybe it's getting Joe up out of the seat and jumping for joy because what the Republicans have proposed, outside of the crazy fringe of the Republican Party, the rest of us sane people in society look at what they're proposing and go, that would crash our economy. The Limit, Save, and Grow Act, otherwise, as I've been saying, otherwise known as the Let's Shoot the Hostages Act, would do drastic, horrible things to our economy. But that's the point. That's what Republicans want. And they know this is going nowhere. It's never going to be passed into law. They know it because there's really nothing there. It's just their wet dream list. It's if we could get Biden to, well, forget that he's president and cares about anybody, we can get him to sign this. If you could get it through the Senate. But you know what it is it's their ideology of painfully slashing spending, poison pilling Social Security and Medicare, slashing taxes under the guise of we're reforming things. And of course, gutting regulatory oversight. Nothing new, nothing surprising, nothing to really have to regroup over, Politico. But, you know, this is why I struggle with our mainstream corporate-controlled media. It's about the horse race. Instead of going, Republicans passed their plan to slash spending by 22% and basically slam both feet on the brakes to have our economy come screeching to a crashing halt. A 22% cut to the Social Security Administration's budget would mean that, well, we'd be closing Social Security offices. Seniors, you want to apply for Social Security? Take a number. It's going to be a while. We would gut food assistance for seniors. As they point out, 1 million low-income seniors would lose food stamps. And really, again, one of the few hot meals people in this bracket get all day. And I know, they love the seniors. They care. We would cut oversight to nursing homes, just all kinds of bad. We'd be throwing, what was the number I saw? At least 430,000 low-income families who are headed by seniors out of their homes because you'd be gutting Section 8 housing. Again, I know it's all bad. It's spending. We got to cut spending across the board. These are real lives. These are real people. And look, if you don't even care about them, you know, I'm not retired. I'm never going to see Social Security. Well, they're gutting what Biden did on the Butch-Lewis Act to help shore up multi-employer pension funds. So for all my union brothers and sisters out there who go, we need Trump back. Maybe if this were to pass, and it's not going to, and you can thank Biden for that. But they want to gut the Butch-Lewis Act, which means your pension, if it's in trouble, kiss that goodbye. And across the board, 22%. Moody's Analytics said it's going to, if this were to happen, It would meaningful. How did they put it? Meaningfully increase the likelihood of a recession, which is what Republicans have wanted all along. 780,000 jobs would be lost, according to Moody's Analytics. Now, again, this isn't going to happen because it's not going to get passed into law. We're not going to make those kind of draconian cuts. Republicans know Democrats would never allow people to be taken advantage of like that. But there's part of me that goes, maybe what we need is a jolt to the system. Maybe what we need is all these people who are supporting this kind of insanity to actually have it affect them. Because I think most people don't understand how government spending affects all of our lives. Whether it's the VA, whether it's the Food and Drug Administration, whether it's any of the oversight or the regulatory bodies that do the work that we take for granted every day. There's part of me goes, I don't know. You look at what they would do to the VA. A 22% cut, according to the VA, would mean 81,000 jobs would be lost. That's on top of the 50,000 that are vacant. You'd have 30 million fewer outpatient visits for veterans. And they said backlog of disability claims would go up something like 130,000. But again, we love the troops. And this is the bizarre place we're in. Because, just yesterday, you couldn't get the Senate to pass a bill to study the effects of cannabis for veterans. I mean, it's simple. How does that not happen? How do you not go, the VA wants to study, and have clinical trials on whether cannabis can help veterans who are suffering from chronic pain or PTSD or any of this stuff from using it. They want to study it. Republicans say no. Filibustered it, actually. They didn't get the cloture vote. And this is one of those moments where you go, there's a party in this country who's praying for disaster, for praying for chaos, so that they can blame Biden. That's all this is about. It's the political gamesmanship of blaming that guy. And it comes back to all of us. And what's the Republican option? I listened to Donald Trump give his spiel on Truth Social, which I got to play this because it's just wow.
Absolutely true. Biden is guilty of obstruction. 1,850 boxes unchecked, many found in Chinatown, heavy on classified documents. He has been totally uncooperative, won't show the documents under any circumstances, and is fighting like hell. I very simply went by the Presidential Records Act. Very importantly, it was designed and written for this purpose. Have a right to declassify and did absolutely nothing wrong, but was purposely given by the DOJ and Biden, a Trump-hating prosecutor, Jack Smith. He's a Trump hater. His wife's a Trump hater. His family's a Trump hater. They all hate Trump. They hate him with a passion. They'll do anything they can to hurt Trump. But he's a harasser and an abuser of our people.
I'm sorry.
In order to obstruct and interfere with the 2020 presidential election. That's why they're doing it. We're leading by a lot in the polls. If I weren't, I believe it would all stop. Or if I weren't running, I believe it would all stop immediately. But that's not going to happen. The public will not stand for this unequal treatment. Joe Biden is guilty. I am not at all. Thank you very much.
What the hell was that? I mean, this is who the Republicans have. This is the guy that he's still fixated on 2020. He's still fixated on the past. Still fixated on, him losing. There's no vision for the future other than anger and retribution. There's nothing going forward. And this is where the Republican Party is. And this is what's frightening to me. Because it appears to me that they're in the last throes of being able to hold on to any sense of reality. They are planning on doing nothing to help. And I said this yesterday. The reality is They have no plan. They have no way forward, and all they keep coming up with is indecency. And this kind of, I listen to Trump talk, and it's mind blowing. And quite frankly, scary. Now, he did do something that I found interesting, and I think he's slipping a little bit in the name calling game because he's always been the good name caller. He's always come up with a crooked Hillary. Well, evidently we're recycling crooked Hillary. Hillary now gets a break. It's now crooked Joe Biden. Very clever, very clever. And it's all because he's really trying to defend himself on this classified documents thing. And if you listen to him, rattling off the nonsense there, it's the kind of projection that I've been telling you Republicans do. When someone's doing something and they know they're doing something, they got to accuse somebody else. As my mother always said, if someone's pointing their finger at you, there's three of them pointing back at them. This is that. This is him going, I know you are, but what am I? This is that kind of, is this the best we can do? Seriously. I know Joe Biden can't get a sentence out, but at least we're investing in infrastructure. At least there's policy that's moving us to reshoring manufacturing. At least there are things that are trying to help. Even if I don't agree with all of them, at least there's some way of going, hey, working families, we're going to try and help you. All I get from my Republican friends is grievance and anger. And how do we stop that? How do we talk about issues again? That's what I want to know. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday I talked about decency. Just being a decent person. It's one of those things that my mother taught me as a child. Treating others as you would want them to treat you, as well or as badly. The golden rule, or at least the silver rule. And I got a ton of email from people, going, that's why Republicans are fighting for our kids. And I'm going, no, that's not what we're seeing. And the weird thing is this is the bizarre point. And I got a bunch of stories today that just highlight the fact that, these are people who won't protect their own kids. What do you think make you think that they care about yours or mine? And I look at Montana Governor Greg Gianforte. Evidently, and I didn't know this, but Greg has a 32-year-old non-binary child who's gay, David, who's lobbying against the anti-trans bill that Montana is moving forward that Gianforte is going to sign. This is one of those things where you go, he's legislating against his own child. Again, it doesn't matter about your kids. This is about his kids. He is willing to go after his own child. And it's twisted and bizarre to me, but this is the kind of thing that's sweeping across red states. I look at Kansas. Kansas just enacted what they're saying is the most sweeping anti-trans bathroom law in the country. They overrode the governor's veto. In fact, they've hurried this so fast, they have no clue how they're going to actually enforce it. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But no idea how you're going to enforce this, other than you were going to set up curtains and start doing random checks. You know, like when I used to play baseball. The coach used to come by with a bat and hit us in the you know where to make sure we had a cup on. Can't do that anymore. But back then, got away with it. Are we going to do that? Is that where we're going? And you just look at this stuff and you just shake your head and go, how did we get here? I mean, speaking of Kansas, there's a Republican senator, guy named Mark Steffen, who was having a meeting with people, your basic, constituent meeting. And of course, they were talking about the issues of the day. And this 22-year-old Wichita State graduate and campaign organizer with the loud light asked, how this legislator, a very Christian legislator, how they would approach a non-Christian constituent. And the guy's response was, I'd be happy to try and convert you. And that wasn't a joke. And this is the weird part of this. And when he was asked about it, he denied it, although it's on tape. And it's just this kind of craziness that we find ourselves in. That these ideologues are running our government. These ideologues are passing laws. And these people who clearly, as I said, don't care about their children. And what do you think they're going to do about yours? Which brings me back to Montana. Representative Carrie Seekins, Republican of state representative in Montana. I just got to play the clip. This blew my mind. This just blows my mind.
Big issues that we have heard today and we've talked about lately is that without surgery, the risk of suicide goes way up. Well, I am one of those parents who lived with a daughter who was suicidal for 3 years. Someone once asked me, wouldn't I just do anything to help save her? And I really had to think. And the answer was no. I was not going to give in to her emotional manipulation because she was incapable of making those decisions, and I had to make those decisions for her. I was not going to let her tear apart my family, and I was not going to let her tear apart me because I had to be strong for her. I had to have a vision for her life when she had none, was incapable of having none. I was lost. I was scared. I spent hours on the floor in prayer because I didn't know that when I woke up, if my daughter was going to be alive.
I mean, stop and think about this for a second. Stop and think about what she is saying. Stop and think about the words coming out of her mouth. Yeah, I would rather risk my child than go through a process of getting them the help that they need. I mean, it's quite remarkable to me. Now, she starts with, they're going to get surgery. That's not what gender-affirming care is. There are 100 steps before you get to that. The fact that this kind of narrow-mindedness exists makes me go, this is why I think the state has to step in cases like this. This is someone who would, and because it comes back to religion, I believe. These are people who would let their children die for their ideology. That's frightening. Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on one. Hey, Alice, what's on your mind?
At the beginning, when you were reading what Trump said, did I miss something? I know I've been busy lately, but did I miss a whole bunch of documents being found?
No.
Okay, good. So we're talking delusions.
Yep.
Okay, and not on my part. Gotcha. And as for the lunatic woman there, mayhaps she needs to keep her religion to herself. But, I mean, everybody has their life to live, but apparently if you're one of them, meaning a Republican, then you get to choose what the other people live. But have a good day, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, this is the part that's scary. Truthfully, I know people who think this way. I think back to a friend years ago who, when I said, look, what would you do if your daughter had to go and get a backroom abortion and she died from it? And he looked me in the eye and said, would not shed a tear. And as a parent, I don't know how you can look at your child and say, I'm going to do everything I can do to help guide you and to help get you the help or the help that you need. Now, look, I don't know how I would deal with a situation with a trans child. I have no idea. I'm going to be completely honest, no idea. But I come back to my core belief in this. This state representative, that state senator, Gianforte, DeSantis, Trump, any of them, they should have not a say. And what's interesting to me is my Republican friends are screaming about parental rights. Isn't this part of parental rights? Now, I keep having people say, well, the kids can do that on their own. No, they can't. They cannot. But here's the thing. With people like this state representative who's like, no. At what point does the state step in, knowing what the statistics are, knowing that if you're not getting the help that folks need through, any number of the alternatives, that suicide rates are through the roof. What do you do with someone who goes, I don't care. It's my belief. What responsibility does the state have? And hearing the woman there say, you know what? Would I do anything? No, I'm not going to do anything and everything. That's frightening. And that's her saying the silent thing out loud. That's her admitting. That there's her ideology and her belief structure. And it's no wonder. It's no wonder kids have a heightened suicide rate with parents like that. I think back to the story I told yesterday about, I was dating a person whose brother was gay, and the friends that he had telling the stories that, that their parents wished them dead, that they were thrown out into the street penniless and driven by when they were homeless and all kinds of horrible things that, as a parent, I can't even begin to fathom. And it comes back down to that just being a decent human being, respecting others with a bit of compassion, especially your own child. I mean, this is mind-blowing to me. But I guess not surprising. Should I be surprised? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And do you know someone like this? Because I tend to think every one of us knows someone like this, who would say, if my kid isn't exactly what I want, well, I don't care. It's frightening. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day a West Virginia cooling tower under construction collapsed, plunging 51 workers to their deaths. It was considered the worst non-mining disaster in West Virginia history. It's also the worst accident in the history of the country's construction industry. Cooling towers were under construction at the Pleasance Power Plant at Willow Island. Union building tradesmen built up the walls of the tower from scaffolding bolted to it. As each section was poured, the forms would be removed and the scaffolding raised and bolted to the new section. The tower had reached about 168 feet when the previous day's concrete walls began to peel away from the tower. The scaffolding plummeted, as did the workers. Many could only be identified by the contents of their wallet. The Steele family was beyond devastated with the loss of 10 family members. In a 2008 retrospective by Ken Ward Jr. of the Charleston Gazette reported, quote, a mix of safety lapses combined to bring the tower crashing down. Concrete in the previous day's lift hadn't hardened enough to hold the scaffolding. Key bolts meant to attach the scaffolding to the tower were missing. An elaborate concrete hoisting system was modified without proper engineering review. Contractors were rushing to speed construction. Dr. Celeste Monfortin of the Milken Institute School of Public Health noted that the case highlights still relevant issues: inadequate OSHA penalties, no criminal sanctions, holding workers responsible for contractors' mistakes, ignoring of previous warning signs, and a disconnect between abstract calculations and real-world applications. Kent Ward Jr. noted in his retrospective that in 2008, there was still no state public employee OSHA program in West Virginia. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Given the rabid right-wingism of most Republican office holders in my state of Texas, you might assume that the climate here is only fit for rattlesnakes, scorpions, and venomous critters of pious political extremism. Yet, the true Texas political character, historically and currently, is vehemently anti-corporate and deeply rooted in the uniting ethic of the common good. For an historic example, look to the state's first constitution. It outlawed banks and required a two-thirds vote of the legislature to form a corporation. And today, grassroots Texans in the rural town of Llano have just demonstrated the power of progressive community values that are common in this supposedly conservative state. The issue was book banning. A batch of political extremists had decided to purge the public library of 17 books. Porno, they shrieked, yet none are pornographic. They're simply about ideas and realities that Republican culture war zealots don't like. Namely, books documenting the history of institutional racism in America and the normality of America's LGBTQ community. Common sense Llano locals rebelled, suing the county government for autocratically trying to control the people's freedom to read and learn. And a federal judge has now ruled that the book banning was flagrantly unconstitutional, ordering the targeted titles back on the shelves. Then, in a collective spasm of knee-jerk ignorance and arrogance, the county's book-banning officials announced that, by gollies, they would just defund and shut down the entire library system. Yeah, that'll teach people to respect authority. Again, though, locals rebelled, turning out in force to protest the officials' political chicanery, forcing them to reverse their closure scheme. This is Jim Hightower saying, as one 10-year-old student in Llano succinctly testified, it's not the county's job to burn the library down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Before we get on to our next guest, I want to quick get a phone call in here. I got David in Milwaukee, wants to weigh in on the trans issue. David, what's on your mind, buddy?
Hi, Rick. Really quickly, good topic. I actually have a cousin of mine that has transitioned, but she's also 30 years old. And, that's her prerogative, and now she's, changing into a man, basically. But again, with kids, that's a whole different thing, because when you do something at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, that is a permanent change. I don't have a problem with somebody if they're 18 or older doing it, but when they're under 18, no, the parents should have a say. It's completely different with the abortion, because an abortion, obviously, that's a that's a situation where if the child is been raped or whatever, it can be corrected quickly. But when you start talking transitioning and doing all that other stuff, that is way too early of an age to start putting an individual in that and having to make a decision that they could regret later in life. I think it should be you wait until you're a little bit older in order to make that decision. That's just me.
Yeah, no, look, and I understand it, David. The reality is all gender affirming care is not under the knife. There are so many steps that you get to before that. And my point is I don't understand it either. And I've had friends who have transitioned, and I've said the exact same thing. I don't understand what you're going through. I'm fortunate I don't, but I hope this is what makes you happy and lets you lead the life that you were hoping you get. I hope this is it. And for kids, look, I come back to the point of I don't want zealots making those decisions. I still think as a parent, I'm going to have hopefully the best wants and hopes for my kids, and have professionals doing this instead of people who are willing to let their children screw them, let them commit suicide if that's where they're at. That's where my problem is. But it's a much more complicated issue than just this black and white stuff we're being fed. Do you agree?
Well, everybody's different. And again, I do think we have to look at the bigger picture that when we're talking about young people that are potentially thinking about this or wanting doing this or whatever, I think we got to say, hey, listen, you know what? This is there has to be a line saying, you know what? This is too much a big event at a very early age. And granted, maybe they're not going under the knife, but I don't think that is the proper time to really get into all this because they're young people. They're, kids have wild imagination. And when you're a child or you're a kid, you can change things on a dime. And I think we just have to encourage them to be, okay, you know what? Hang on, hold your horses. You can't, as a parent, you can't give to every wish that they want. You know what I'm saying?
This is the thing, David.
You have to say no on occasion.
This is the thing. Nobody's saying that anyone jumps into this just because, hey, today I woke up and I'm going to change my mind. This is a long, lengthy process. But I appreciate the thoughts and your input, David. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
I now know this topic is going to have to come up with my next guest, who is a reporter over at Raw Story, Sarah Burris, one of my favorite people on the planet. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you.
Happy Thursday. I'm assuming you're going to weigh in on this.
So one of the most important pieces of gender-affirming care is counseling. It's the initial stages of every single piece of transitioning that has to take place first. Before you can do medication, before you can do surgery, there has to be a lot of counseling, and it has to go through like many, many, many years.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is what the right does masterfully. It's the same thing with the abortion issue. They make it sound like there are drive-throughs. You can go through on I'm on the way to school. I've decided I want to change today. I'm going to go through the drive-through sex change lane at the fast food place. It's not. This is a long process, and there's so many more components that even I'm still learning about. Because I now have to. This isn't my issue. It's not an issue I want to talk anything about. But when you've got, people like this state representative who said, you know what, I'm not going to do everything I can do to help my kid, it scares me.
It's also exceptionally rare for surgeries to happen before you're 18. In some states, there are already laws that exist for this kind of thing. In some cases, they never have surgery.
Right.
It just depends on the individual. But again, like this goes back to the overall idea of you as a legislator have no right to make a decision about my child or your child or his child or their child. Nobody does, because these are all complex issues and parents know them better.
Yeah, is it too complex for our political system right now? I mean, the sad reality is we can't seem to have an honest conversation about what this even is. Because, look, it took me a while to figure out the terms and all of this. Are we capable of having this conversation?
I do think that we're capable of it because I don't think Americans are that stupid.
I don't know.
I think the issue is just saying, do you want the government telling you what books your kids can read? Because that's what's happening in Florida. Do you want the government to tell you? I mean, this goes back to the whole thing. Remember in New York, whenever they were saying you couldn't buy big gulps anymore and conservatives were losing their mind over it. It's the exact same nanny state that they have been cursing for decades. And here they are proposing the exact same nanny state. We want to know what your children are reading, what their teachers are saying to them, who their teachers are married to. I mean, it is a level of ridiculousness where it's just like, get out of my life and go make policy about the government, not about me and my family.
The one good thing that's come out of this, I mean, at least from my perspective, is I didn't know so many people cared about women's sports.
Right? If only all of the people who care this much about women's sports were actually watching women's sports, then maybe Brittany Griner wouldn't have had to fly over to Russia to make extra money, and could have been fine in the WNBA by herself.
Now, I do have problems with combative sports, and I do have a problem with that. Like I've said before, I watched an MMA fight that they should have never been in the same ring together. But again, this is a conversation that we just can't have as a society because it's too ramped up.
And I think that there are too many people who are trying to make it into something that it isn't. Too many people are using this as a wedge issue just because they want to make, jokes about cutting off a wing. That's the thing that I feel like happens so much, particularly with Matt Gaetz. He talks a whole lot about penises.
Yeah, they seem to be fixated on it. They seem to be fixated on children's private parts. But here's the thing, and look, as a parent, if it were my child, I certainly don't want, some of these people telling me what to do, but I would be I'd be almost impossible to agree to a lot of the things. And I think a lot of parents are the same way. I think what's being sold by the right is that government's going to make your child do this, that there's going to be someone who's turning your kids. And that's not factual. That's the fear that gets people all riled up.
It is. And I think what Democrats should really do is go to parents and just be like, is this a problem for you? Then why do you care? If this is not a problem that you're dealing with in your family, in your home right now, what makes you think it ever would? Really?
Yeah. No,
I feel like you would see some signs of this, before your kid turns 10 years old.
Yeah, it's a much more complex issue and much, and having had some of these conversations with people, I know there's no policy that you can make a one size fits all, and that's my problem with all of this stuff. If you're using the law as a bludgeon, that's a problem. And there are no simplistic answers in this world. And look, I've said before, I would struggle if it were my child, but I don't want the government telling me what to do. It's that simple. I want to move on because this wasn't where I wanted to go with you, but I appreciate it anyway. I wanted to get your thoughts on the testimony today. A couple of testimonies. Evidently, Mike Pence testified in front of a federal grand jury. Do we know anything about Pence coming in and talking about the day they wanted to hang him?
That sneaky bugger. He crept in through the garage and took a special elevator up to the grand jury floor so nobody would see him. And
yeah, he knows all about garages, doesn't he?
Right? He spent a lot of time in that Capitol garage. We don't know anything that was said. The only person that can talk about it is going to be Mike Pence. And my guess is that he has been running so long to not say some of the things that he probably had to say to the grand jury that he's never going to tell.
Yeah. But the important part is a vice president got called into a grand jury to talk about the treatment and the pressure put on him by the president. That's a big freaking deal.
It's a huge deal, and it's also a big deal in terms of the timeline, because we've had everybody now come before this grand jury. I was struggling to try and figure out who hasn't come before this grand jury to talk about it. And Mike Pence is the kind of guy that you bring in at the last part of it before, some indictments start to roll. And, I don't know if that means that Trump's going to be indicted or if that means that Mark Meadows is going to be indicted or, you know what.
Yeah, get your bingo card out. It could be anyone. The person I want to hear testify, I want to hear Mother. I want Mother to testify.
She was there.
She was there. She's got the stones. I can't imagine she's all too thrilled. Just throwing that out there. Also, another trial today. It's court day. The E. Jean Carroll trial. Any thoughts on the testimony that came out of that?
So what was interesting today is, yesterday we saw a little bit of the Carol stuff. Mostly it was with her lawyers asking her questions. Today it was Donald Trump's lawyer, the bombastic Joe Tacopina, who really was trying to press her in a way that I think made him look bad. Asking like the same question over and over and over again, which really hacked off the judge, who is like has a very low BS level. This judge does. And so there were a couple of times where the judge was just like, all right, quiet down with that. Like we've heard this question enough. So there was some stuff where, he was pressing her on a lot of questions. The thing about her story is that it really hasn't changed. She never really knew specific details like the date, things like that. She knew, but every single other detail that she has ever talked about has been pretty consistent. I think, too, her story where, she basically came home and immediately called some of her friends to talk to them about, like, what do I do? And them telling her, this is a really bad idea to come forward. Don't do this. You're going to get destroyed. Which at the time, that's a little bit like what the world was like.
It
right?
was what
like
the world
you're talking
was like.
about.
Yeah.
New York City with Donald Trump, one of the wealthiest, self-described wealthiest men in the city, with a lot of lawyers, which is another thing that she said today was, he has all these lawyers. He's got like 200 lawyers. Look over there. He's got 2 tables of lawyers. And it is a startling contrast, I think, the way that things are described in that courtroom, where you have Donald Trump's empty chair and then like 200 lawyers, right? Not literally, figuratively, hyperbolically.
How do you think that's going to play? The fact that Trump hasn't shown up. Do you think he will?
Yeah.
Will he show up, or is it just all going to be deposition testimony?
So the problem is that they basically had to tell the judge by the end of today if he was going to show up or not. Because the judge was like, I'm not going to have this whole like last minute kind of thing where he just shows up and is like, hey, everybody. Because that's ridiculous. What has been happening, though, is that Donald Trump is basically testifying without being under oath on Truth Social, where he's ranting and raving. And that was basically how the day started yesterday. And then it started again today, where it's just like, you need to tell your client and his family to shut up, because this is a problem. And I think he's getting very close to the judge instituting a gag order if he doesn't calm down. We'll see what happens tomorrow. But I do think that like the big piece of it where, there are all of these things that E. Jean Carroll can say whenever she's talking, and there's no one to give the counter story, or to explain things.
Well, all he's saying is it never happened. I mean, so if his argument is it never happened, I wasn't there, I don't know what you're talking about, what counter argument could he give other than I wasn't there, don't know what she's talking about?
But his problem is that hasn't been his story. His story is all over the place. Like the first thing was, well, I don't even know her. I've never even met her before. And then it turns out there was a picture of her and him. And then it's like, she's too old. I would never be attracted to her. And then when he was giving his deposition, they showed a picture of her and he thought that it was Marla Maples, his ex-wife, and it was E. Jean Carroll. And so there are lots of pieces of his deposition specifically where, there's really no way for him to explain away what he said and, or to say like, oh, you're taking that out of context. Like none of that can happen because he's not there and his lawyers can't, testify for him.
Yeah. Well,
so I think all of that is going to work against him.
And yet he had a rambling Truth Social thing today about something. Biden's got 1,800 boxes, and he's as innocent as the driven snow, and it was rambling and insane. But it shows me that I don't know. I think he's struggling here.
I think he is too, and that's the other piece of the whole document case. Is yesterday his lawyer sent a letter to the House Intelligence Committee, and basically said, "Help." Like we as the lawyers, we went through all 15 of the boxes that Trump handed over to the National Archives, and there's nothing in there. We really need you guys to step in here and tell the DOJ to leave him alone. And except that they said it in like a really crappy, like mean sort of lawyerly way. But what was interesting about it, I thought, is that they were only talking about the 15 boxes. So the first encounter that Trump had with the National Archives before they started calling the FBI was he gave them back 15 boxes full of crap.
Right.
And then there were like 5 times after that where they found out there were more things. There were classified documents. There was a computer. There's a thumb drive. There was an envelope, and basically that's when the FBI showed up at his door, right? So, and they still think that there's more, right? That's the other part of this. So it's just funny that they're just trying to change the story about, well, there's nothing in those 15 boxes. Like, oh, tell me about everything after that.
Exactly. You know, because if you stayed in one of his hotels and you took an ashtray or a towel, they would hunt you down. But he's going to steal classified documents and doesn't expect the National Archives to come after him?
Yeah, seriously. And I mean, that was kind of the conversations in a lot of the emails that were back and forth between Trump's lawyers and the National Archives, where they're like, look, dude, like you're tying my hands here. Like, I have no other option but to turn this over to the FBI. So know that you've been warned.
Yeah.
And then basically there was another year of back and forth, and the FBI coming to Mar-a-Lago and getting an envelope and then saying, oh, that's it. And his lawyer saying, oh, that's it. And then it's more and more and more. And so this letter is just basically like begging Republicans to step in for him and tell the DOJ to stop or figure out some way to make it stop. And I don't know if that means, going after Merrick Garland the way that they have been with Alvin Bragg. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So last bit on this then. Does this go anywhere? I mean, are we seeing this eventually becoming something? I mean, it's great that there's all this investigation, there's all this chatter. Does it matter? Is it going to become anything?
No.
Okay.
I think the big piece of it is that I think that this is an example of obstruction of justice. And so if that letter then starts to provoke Republicans to get involved here, then I think that there's going to be a conversation with an inspector general.
There you go. Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Sarah, I appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. If you want to check out Sarah's work, Sarah Burris, rawstory.com. That's the website. Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Remember, check out the website, rawstory.com. Quick break. Right back.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1825. That was the day that saw what is widely considered the first strike for the 10-hour workday. It happened in Boston, Massachusetts. Journeyman carpenters had grown tired of being required to work from sunup to sundown. They decided it was time to make a stand. But the master carpenters who controlled the craft did not side with the journeymen. The master carpenters claimed that the day-long toil had, quote, been customary from time immemorial. With this resistance from the top, the first 10-hour workday strike went down in defeat. But the idea had been born, and soon it began to grow. Boston carpenters struck again in 1832 and again 3 years later. These strikes were also unsuccessful. But during the last strike, the workers wrote a flyer that read, quote, "We have been too long subjected to the odious, cruel, unjust, and tyrannical system which compels the operative mechanic to exhaust his physical and mental powers. We have rights and duties to perform as American citizens and members of society, which forbid us to dispose of more than 10 hours for a day's work." These words echoed to Philadelphia, where workers took up the banner for the 10-hour workday. The strike spread across the city of brotherly love, from printers to carpenters, from bakers to public employees. 10 hours became the law in Philadelphia, then throughout Pennsylvania. From there, the call for 10 hours spread across the country. Later, the movement grew into a demand for the 8-hour workday. The ability of workers to have time away from the job to live a full life of dignity is one of the core causes of the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Jenna sent me an email during the break. And again, this trans issue, it shouldn't be this big of a deal. I don't think it really should be. But her question is flat out, yes or no. If it's your child, yes or no. And again, this isn't that kind of black and white. If you're going to, and I've said this before, I'm not a black and white, hard, right, wrong kind of thinker. There's a lot of gray in this. And I know it's easy. It's easy to have this knee-jerk reaction. Absolutely not. But look, I've known people throughout the years who, they're a little different. I've talked to medical people who have said, look, there are things that happen at birth that, you can't explain. Why would you put into law something so draconian, so hard and fast that there's no way to help? You look at the abortion issue. We talked about this yesterday. This woman who, had a problem that the medical professionals couldn't help her. Almost cost her life because they didn't know legally what they could and they could not do because we've passed such draconian laws. Now, is this something we should have a conversation around? Yes. And ultimately, I come back on the very conservative view of limited government. Keep government out of my room. These are family decisions. These are difficult decisions. Nobody jumps into this going, oh boy. And I don't know that there are medical professionals who would go along with that. And if there are, then we have to have an oversight to weed that out. My view is this is why you have regulation. This is why you have people to oversee this stuff. But to say absolutely not, you can do nothing. And I want to emphasize, Janice, it's very, very, very clear to me that there's much more than just what's been spoon-fed to us, that everything is the knife. Because as someone told me a couple of weeks ago, it's like Planned Parenthood and abortion. The right paints Planned Parenthood as, everything they do is abortion. And the reality is it's less than 3% of what they do. Gender-affirming care is the same thing. A very, very small, minuscule percentage is actually what we're being sold. Most of it's counseling. Drug therapy, which, if we want to have a conversation on whether it's good or bad, okay, that's great. But ultimately, should that not be between the family, their doctor? Remember that? Remember that, my conservative friends? Just kind of throwing that out there. I do want to hear your thoughts on this. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Again, no single bullet, no simplistic phrase or slogan is going to change this. But I think a little compassion, a little decency might help. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
The Environmental Protection Agency will call for restrictions on all future and existing power plants that run on coal or natural gas.
Biden EPA to launch new landmark effort to limit carbon pollution.
Climate change isn't a future problem, it is a current problem.
Earth hits grim new records for global ice loss and rising seas. Plus,
environmental justice will become the responsibility of every single federal agency. I mean, every single federal agency.
President Biden boosts environmental justice.
All of those boosts and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Will we step up to our ambitions? Will we stand together to meet the great challenges we have? Will we preserve our planet for future generations?
No, I don't think so. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Dizzy Doyen, big news from the EPA this week.
Oh, yes, indeed. As we go to air, the Environmental Protection Agency is on the verge of proposing new rules requiring the nation's power plants to cut their carbon emissions.
How quickly can the Republicans write a lawsuit against that?
Oh, instantly.
Yeah.
It matters because electricity from coal and natural gas-fired power plants is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. after transportation. If adopted, the new draft pollution standards would require utility companies to capture nearly all carbon emissions from their smokestacks by 2040, leaving the companies to determine how, either by switching to clean renewable sources like wind and solar, or by using costly new technology to capture emissions from their smokestacks.
Or by filing a lawsuit.
No commercial power plants in the United States use carbon capture technology right now, and the new rules are expected to trigger an immediate challenge from Republican-controlled states in the Supreme Court, which blocked a previous Obama-era effort.
Of course.
Meanwhile, the Earth broke grim new records for melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and ocean warming in 2022, caused primarily by the burning of fossil fuels. The World Meteorological Organization's annual State of the Global Climate Report, released on Earth Day, confirms that the past 8 years were the hottest 8 years in the instrumental record. Last year, the oceans hit a new all-time record high for heat content. Antarctic sea ice fell to its lowest extent on record. 60% of the ocean surface saw at least one marine heat wave. Average global sea levels also reached record highs, and the rate of sea level rise itself has doubled since 1993. Additional evidence that man-made climate change is accelerating. The report also found, quote, off-the-charts melting of the world's glaciers, and that matters for millions of people around the world who rely on glacier meltwater for drinking water and food production.
Off the charts melting.
Yep. Here in the U.S., about 1 in 3 people in the United States breathe polluted air that harms their health and shortens their lives. And it's primarily from gas-powered vehicles and industrial plants. That's according to the American Lung Association's annual State of the Air report, which found that increasing wildfires, drought, and inequality have stalled improving air quality efforts, with low-income and communities of color disproportionately affected.
It also found that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's hometown of Bakersfield is the most polluted city in the entire United States.
Yep, and McCarthy has proposed repealing clean energy provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act climate law. But the vast majority of Americans support federal government action to address climate change. According to new Pew Research data, 70% of Americans want the government to prioritize renewable energy sources like wind and solar over expanding production of fossil fuels. But there's a deep partisan divide. 80% of Democrats consider climate change a major threat. Only 23% of Republicans do.
Lucky they got gerrymandering.
President Biden criticized McCarthy and Republicans when he signed an executive order creating the Office of Environmental Justice in the White House to ensure that poverty, race, and ethnic status do not lead to worse exposure to pollution and environmental harm.
Nice.
Environmental justice will be the mission of the entire government, woven directly into how we work with state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. This is an order that directs the federal agencies to address gaps in science and technology.
Nice. About time.
And finally, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday rejected an attempt by Big Oil to delay climate liability lawsuits brought by U.S. cities and states trying to hold oil companies accountable for costly damages caused by man-made climate change. Big Oil was trying to move the cases to friendlier federal courts, but the Supreme Court declined to bail them out on that.
Nice. Are you okay, Supreme Court? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired
tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm still stuck on the political headline. It's just all day. It's stuck with me. Headline at Politico: White House regroups after McCarthy's debt ceiling success. What is the White House regrouping on? Is this the regrouping on? Oh my gosh, they gave us a really good document to run our next campaign on to attack Republicans with, because they want to cut 22% of the VA. They want to cut Social Security by the administration by 22%. They want to slash and burn our economy. I can't believe they did this, but they did. And here to share some thoughts on what this could mean, what the Limit, Save, and Grow Act would actually do to our economy. That's why I've asked Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Also the co-author of Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be on tonight, Rick. Thank you.
So, here's the thing. I keep looking at this piece of legislation that it's not even a legislation, it's a proposal. I keep looking at this proposal and going, what exactly are you thinking? Cutting spending by 22%. This is gonna put the brakes on the economy and cause massive pain and suffering across all swaths of our economy.
It could be they're planning to run on massive pain and suffering under the Biden administration. And, hope that people will think it's all Biden's fault and vote for Trump again, I guess. I don't know what else. I mean, they want to have federal spending grow far less than inflation. Their number one priority, which they've been talking about since the day they were sworn in, is to take away money from the IRS. Even they say it's going to increase the deficit because people are going to pay less taxes if you have the IRS having less inspectors to argue with people, especially the rich people. But they don't care about that because it's okay if rich people don't pay their taxes according to them. They want to ban all assistance to people with student loans because that's just unheard of that college students would get some help from the government. No help for renewable energy. They want to have work requirements for 55-year-old people who are getting supplemental nutrition assistance, what we used to call food stamps. And they want to have subsidies for more people using fossil fuels that pollute more because they think that's a good idea. I mean, it's just absurd what they're trying to do, Rick. It's like I see things from their point of view.
I have the same kind of, I can't believe they did this, as a political observer, as someone who, just as a spectator going, wow, you dealt yourself a really crummy hand on purpose, because this is a lot of bad. And here's the thing. I don't know how it helps with inflation. By slashing spending so dramatically, aren't you slamming on the brakes and causing massive layoffs? I mean, Moody's is saying 780,000 potential job losses. I mean, as a Wall Street guy, isn't this going to cause massive harm?
Well, if they end up with massive amounts of layoffs and less money for, people who are financially challenged who get food stamps, yeah, it could cut down on inflation. I mean, if there's huge numbers of people losing their jobs, they're not going to be buying, eggs anymore. And then I doubt we'll see the price of eggs going up as much. But I don't think that's what the American people want. I don't think they want to see inflation going down because no one can afford to buy anything. I think they want to see inflation going down because companies stop raising the prices of stuff so much more than they're raising wages. And even, listen to the Chipotle CEO speak the other day. He's saying they're raising prices far more than inflation. And now even the price of avocados has gone down and their profits are up because they're not reducing prices of guacamole just because prices go down, even though they increased it when prices went up. We're seeing more profits for companies that deal with food and stuff like that that's gone up a lot. And people are making a little more money, but not enough to keep up. It's just bad.
Yeah. No, the other part of this is my fear is the fear of the opposite. Say it's going to slow down inflation. My fear is deflation. My fear is we do so much that we cause things to go in the opposite direction, where now you've got all this surplus of stuff going on, nobody with any money, and things have to go the other way, which causes, well, even more problems.
It could. I mean, I wonder if in their hearts they actually are looking for some sort of massive economic slowdown and trouble so they can run on that.
No, that's what I said. I said, look, it's not the Limit, Save, and Grow Act. It's the Let's Shoot the Hostages Act. Because this is what they're basically doing. They're going to take us to the brink on raising the debt ceiling, which is stupid to me. Or, look, they want to default. So give me what we want, crash the economy with massive spending cuts, or we're going to crash the economy by defaulting and causing all kinds of other problems. The only thing I can come up to is they want the recession they've been hoping and praying for, so they can try and pin it on Biden. That's all that's out there.
I mean, I think that's distinctly possible. I mean, I wish that wasn't the case, but it seems to be. The analogy I try to make with people, it's if your spouse gave you a shopping list and a budget and told you to go shopping, and you came back with everything and you spent the amount of money you're supposed to, and then your spouse said, "Oh, I'm not going to pay the credit card bill on your credit card unless you agree to, I don't know, wash my car every week for the rest of the year or something." It's ridiculous. We can't have a debate about paying the bills for things we already bought last year.
Hold on. I got to stop you here. Wait a second. This is, I'm wondering if my wife would fall for that.
Anything's possible, Rick.
No, she just said no. But hey, it might have been worth a try if you thought it would have worked. But no, this is the weird part of where we're at, and I gotta wonder how much this is affecting what's going on. Generally, I don't care what happens on Wall Street. I'm a Main Street guy, but they do kind of work a little bit together. How much damage have we already done to Wall Street, and how much more could this do? Either way, if they get their wet dream list of 22% cuts, which they're not going to, or we default, what do things look like, do you think?
I don't really care about the people that work on Wall Street all that much. I mean, yes, there's a few 100,000 people, and a lot of them are just regular people that get up and work for a living. And there's a few very rich people. But what I do care about is half the people in our country have money in the stock market through their IRAs or 401ks or pension plans or something. About half the people in the country. And if they can crash the economy by having a default on U.S. Treasuries, which is always considered risk-free, that's going to cause a massive problem with anyone who has money invested in any part of the financial markets, whether it's stocks or bonds. Even money market funds aren't going to do well if that happens. Right now, we've been living since really before World War II with the U.S. dollar as the primary currency for the whole world. People use U.S. dollars in the Middle East for pricing oil and buying airplanes in France and things in Asia too. And if they end up causing people to lose faith in the U.S. dollar and go to, I don't know, Chinese renminbis or Russian rubles or something, that's going to be a massive, massive decrease in the power of the United States of America. And personally, I think that's bad for a lot of the people in our country, although maybe not for Republican congressmen.
It's crazy. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Morris Pearl, chair of the Patriotic Millionaires. If you want to check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. Also, check out his book, Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. And we'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at this. Now, you brought up 401ks, and I'm getting it from all sides. Everyone's going, my 401k was so much better under Trump. Biden's done all this stuff. He's caused all this inflation. My argument is inflation was going to happen no matter who the president was. The $1,400 that they gave out didn't cause this. Supply chain issues had a big part of it. Greed had a big part of it. But these are a lot of things outside of Biden's control. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of companies raising prices far more than they're raising, than the prices they pay are being raised, far more than wages are going up, and corporate profits are way up. The reason people's 401ks did well under Trump is because they reduced corporate taxes. I did well under Trump too, financially. Stock market did very well until the pandemic, of course. And that's because the tax rates were reduced for big corporations. If you own a big company and the tax rate went from 35% down to 20%, you're making a lot more money.
So wouldn't the argument then go, Morris, if it went down from 30 to 20, we should take it from 20 down to 10 because my 401k can do better? Shouldn't that be the argument?
Well, yeah, if the half of the country that owns stock, their 401ks do better. And the few people like me who get all their money from investing in the stock market, I would do great if you got rid of corporate taxes altogether. But that wouldn't help most Americans. Most Americans who actually work for a living would be worse off because we'd be making the workers pay all the taxes, and the investors like me would have far lower taxes to pay through our stocks and our corporations and whatnot. So yeah, that would make the rich a lot richer and make the people in the middle who have 401ks a little bit better off and make a lot of people a lot worse off.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is that
in 2017, that's exactly why people voted Democrat in 2018.
So what's interesting to me is, this belt tightening talk. We need 22% across the board cuts, without talking about raising revenue. And I don't know about your household, but when the budgets are tight, I work a little bit of overtime. We bring a little bit more money in before we start, cutting off, important things like, I don't know, paying our bills or fixing the hole in the roof or putting gas in the car. You may work a little bit extra to bring in a little more revenue into the house. How come we're not talking about that almost at all? I mean, there's almost no one talking about raising taxes except for you folks at the Patriotic Millionaires.
We're working on it. We were having parties last week in Washington. You had some beers, I think, at our one of our cocktail parties.
I did, yes.
So we're doing the best we can to get people talking about raising taxes for the rich. We got a bunch of congressmen walking out on the east lawn of the Capitol building talking about it. So I'm trying. I really am. I even went on Fox News last week. Okay, so that's what I was doing.
And you did very well. I mean, so the question is, how do we get you into more places? How do we get that message, blaring out louder and stronger? Because look, I think this could be that issue that is nonpartisan to where we go, look, the old idea of being, back in the cave, the one with the big shoulders carries the most water.
It should be, but it's not, because these congressmen, they spend all of their time talking to the top half of the people in the economy. And in fact, the part of the very top of the top half, because they need all this money to run their campaigns. It all comes down to campaign finance. Yeah. And after a while, you spend all of your time schmoozing with rich people. You get to understand how it's so difficult to be rich and have to pay taxes and stuff. I mean, rich people don't like paying taxes. At least some of them don't. I get messages from congresspeople every week. Oh, Congressman so-and-so is coming by New York and would love to sit down and find out what your priorities are. And believe me, most people who spend an hour with some random congressman are not talking about taxing the rich more. And the people who spend time with random congresspeople are generally people with a lot of money who make a lot of donations. I'll tell you that.
No, I have friends who are in Congress. They tell me no one's ever bought my vote, but they buy my ear 15 minutes at a time as I'm begging for campaign money. It is not a surprise.
I have business cards say Patriotic Millionaires on them. Very few people turn down a meeting with the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires.
I can see that. But look, you're a very influential guy and very interesting to talk to. So last question I've got for you. In going back to this Politico argument, the Politico headline of the White House having to regroup. Do you see this as something the White House is going to be able to use as a strategist? Do you see this as a moment where they have to regroup, or is this like I think this is a gift? It gives the Biden administration to go, look at what Republicans want to do to you.
I honestly believe that it's allowing the president to make a firm choice. They're saying, here's what the Republicans want to do, and here's what I want to do. And you have a choice. And I think they're making clear demarcation between the two sides. The president's first ad has flags and patriotic music and saying, we are the people fighting for your freedom to be able to make choices and have enough money to pay for stuff. That is real freedom. And that the Republicans are against that. They want you to be serfs. And I mean, that's not what Biden said. So, but I think that's what we're going to be able to run on, the Democrats.
Well, it's going to be, we'll see how this plays out. But Morris, I appreciate the insight. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Great, Rick. Great to be in your show. Thank you.
Morris Pearl, chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. Again, check out the website, patrioticmillionaires.org, and get the book, Tax the Rich. Lies, loopholes, and lobbyists make the rich even richer. Quick break, right back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Got an email from Brian listening on KCAA in San Bernardino. He asks, Rick, listening to you talk about taxing the rich today, and it sounded too long to fight back against the simplistic responses I get from my coworkers. He says, I hate taxes is so much easier than justifying tax the rich. And he suggestions on how we have these conversations. Look, you're never going to convince the I hate taxes crowd to suddenly embrace them. It's not, because they've been trained like Pavlovian dogs. Anytime we hear the word taxes, we get all frothy in the mouth without asking who, why, what, and where, and how. You start talking about paving the road. Like, there are parts of my little hamlet here that could seriously use some investment, and I understand the money is coming. My Jeep doesn't like it. That doesn't like those roads. My front end, not thrilled. That's how we pave our roads. But you have to explain that on a certain level. But and we can talk about all the positives we want. But if they have their heads in the you're lost. And the thing is there are a bunch of reasons why we should be taxing the rich. A huge part of it is, I argue back during the Tea Party years, the redistribution angle. We have redistributed wealth from working people to rich people. We've created a large billionaire class through our tax code. We can undo that. So, taxing the very wealthy is one way to reduce inequality, to reduce the kind of, and not just inequality in wages, but inequality in political power, inequality in educational outcomes, inequality in healthcare outcomes, a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the main reasons you tax the rich is, investing in what you need. Social programs, for instance, Social Security, we could fully fund and expand. Medicare, Medicaid, all of those things. Infrastructure, education, healthcare, all of that, we could be doing it. But more importantly, as well, is economic growth. And this is the thing that nobody talks about. And this is where the frustration in looking at what McCarthy and the Klan are doing. By reducing spending, you're taking money out of the economy, which is going to reduce the jobs, which means people are going to have less income, which means you're slowing things down. Investing smartly in things that we need, roads, bridges, broadband access, solar power, all of these things. We have the ability to create an economy, a just economy where workers actually get a fair shake. And for me, if Biden would do the things that I want him to do, use his executive order power much more frequently. For instance, saying that any organization doing business with the federal government has to allow their workers to join and form unions and to engage in collective bargaining. And none of this union busting stuff, hiring these high power union busting firms. You sit down, you negotiate, you treat your employees with dignity. I would write that in a heartbeat. But, that's not where we are. There are so many reasons why we should have a much higher tax rate, and we can't have those conversations because, again, we've been trained for 2 generations now that taxes are bad, that it's government stealing from us, and that's not reality. It's the price of admission. It's the price of being part of society. And I had someone recently go, "Well, you advocate for a 90% tax rate. What if they were taxing you at 90%?" And I said, I would be thrilled to be taxed at 90%. Thrilled. Because it means I'd be making several $1 million a year, or under the Patriotic Millionaire Plan, over $100 million a year. You tell me, would you be okay being taxed at 90% if your paycheck said $100 million at the end of the year? And it's not on all 100 million. It is a graduated progressive tax where the more you make, the higher your tax rate goes. And what the patriotic millionaires are talking about doing is, that living wage number, whatever you put that in, I think they've got it at $36,000. No one pays taxes on the first $36,000. And then incrementally, much like the Eisenhower years, incrementally that rate goes up, small percentage by small percentage, all the way up to $100 million. To where you're not paying 90%, you're paying 90% on that dollar over $100 million. And you take that revenue and you pay your bills. How do you think we got so deep in debt? We got so deep in debt by whipping out the credit card, paying for things that we need, things that we pushed for, and saying to the people who we used to tax, no, you go ahead. We'll put it on the arm. Don't worry about it. Let the taxpayer pick it up. Let those working stiffs pick it up. When do we say enough? When do we say no more? I think what Morris and his group are doing, extremely important. And we need to be pushing back against all of this. And this talk of inflation, it's crazy to me. They're pointing it all at Biden when the reality is supply chain issues are a huge part of this. Yeah, government spending, overspending government is, that's a problem. But I don't think we've overspent. A lot of our inflation problems, corporate greed. Maybe start reining that in. Greedflation, that's our problem. Look at our corporate profits. Nobody's hurting in the boardrooms. People are hurting who get up and punch a clock every day. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1825. That was the day that saw what is widely considered the first strike for the 10-hour workday. It happened in Boston, Massachusetts. Journeyman carpenters had grown tired of being required to work from sunup to sundown. They decided it was time to make a stand. But the master carpenters who controlled the craft did not side with the journeymen. The master carpenters claimed that the day-long toil had, quote, been customary from time immemorial. With this resistance from the top, the first 10-hour workday strike went down in defeat. But the idea had been born, and soon it began to grow. Boston carpenters struck again in 1832 and again 3 years later. These strikes were also unsuccessful. But during the last strike, the workers wrote a flyer that read, quote, "We have been too long subjected to the odious, cruel, unjust, and tyrannical system which compels the operative mechanic to exhaust his physical and mental powers. We have rights and duties to perform as American citizens and members of society, which forbid us to dispose of more than 10 hours for a day's work." These words echoed to Philadelphia, where workers took up the banner for the 10-hour workday. The strike spread across the city of brotherly love, from printers to carpenters, from bakers to public employees. 10 hours became the law in Philadelphia, then throughout Pennsylvania. From there, the call for 10 hours spread across the country. Later, the movement grew into a demand for the 8-hour workday. The ability of workers to have time away from the job to live a full life of dignity is one of the core causes of the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Given the rabid right-wingism of most Republican office holders in my state of Texas, you might assume that the climate here is only fit for rattlesnakes, scorpions, and venomous critters of pious political extremism. Yet, the true Texas political character, historically and currently, is vehemently anti-corporate and deeply rooted in the uniting ethic of the common good. For an historic example, look to the state's first constitution. It outlawed banks and required a 2/3 vote of the legislature to form a corporation. And today, grassroots Texans in the rural town of Llano have just demonstrated the power of progressive community values that are common in this supposedly conservative state. The issue was book banning. A batch of political extremists had decided to purge the public library of 17 books. Porno, they shrieked, yet none are pornographic. They're simply about ideas and realities that Republican culture war zealots don't like, namely books documenting the history of institutional racism in America and the normality of America's LGBTQ community. Common sense Llano locals rebelled, suing the county government for autocratically trying to control the people's freedom to read and learn. And a federal judge has now ruled that the book banning was flagrantly unconstitutional, ordering the targeted titles back on the shelves. Then, in a collective spasm of knee-jerk ignorance and arrogance, the county's book-banning officials announced that, by gollies, they would just defund and shut down the entire library system. Yeah, that'll teach people to respect authority. Again, though, locals rebelled, turning out in force to protest the officials' political chicanery, forcing them to reverse their closure scheme. This is Jim Hightower saying, as one 10-year-old student in Llano succinctly testified, it's not the county's job to burn the library down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick
So
Smith.
evidently more stories coming out around the Tucker Carlson firing. Evidently, it's the text messages. Evidently, this is what the latest is, and I don't know if it's true or not. Well, we may never know, and I don't really care. But the latest bit is it's the text messages. Evidently, there was some inflammatory stuff, possibly some racist stuff. Like we said yesterday, the Fox executives have their dirt dossier. This was probably a big part of it. Now, the interesting thing is, I got a bunch of listeners saying this is time for Tucker to run for president. Get rid of Trump. Tucker for president. I'm waiting for that to happen. But here to share some thoughts on, well, just the whole bit of insanity and what it really means. I've asked our good friend Trygve Olsen to come talk with us. Trygve is an advisor over at the Lincoln Project, also the principal over at Viking Strategies. Trygve, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me on. It's good to talk to you again.
So what do you make of this? Does it matter? Does all of this this nonsense? This is me amount to a hill of beans?
Well, so here's the thing. At pretty much any job in America, if you were to be using the C word towards your boss, coupled with the fact that, Tucker is a purported capitalist, but the only person who seemed to advertise on his show was My Pillow guy. So, I think between the economics and the fact that Tucker was doing things that, quite frankly, anybody who is working, if they do that kind of stuff, would probably get the axe dropped on him. He probably got a longer leash than most.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean, but the reality is, he did have a lot of people who bought into what he was selling on air. Even though, if you look at some of the text messages we've seen, maybe didn't quite, wasn't on 100% behind. There was that Janice face kind of, the person who was on screen, the person who was off screen. Maybe there's part of that. But
I kind of think, what Tucker and Fox and a lot of media, I mean, and it's one of the reasons why I like what you do with your show, right? But there's a lot of media, and Fox is an example of this, that is based on selling. It's basically selling the sportification of politics, and Tucker Carlson clearly did not believe a lot of what he was saying, but he was saying it to get an audience and to gin them up, and it's really unhealthy in our democracy when you have organizations like Fox that have built media empires on a business model that is all about outrage and overconfidence, and that's what they sell, and it's a dopamine hit for the people who are extremists because they want to get in to hear the next outrage. And the problem with it is it becomes circular. When you start doing the outrage thing, you have to get something more outrageous each time, and then you have to tell your people they know the truth, even though the stuff that you're peddling, yourself isn't true.
That was the frame.
I don't know
wasn't
how
it?
they look their kids in the eye.
That was the frame, wasn't it? Tucker got fired because he was telling the truth, and my response back was, "Which truth? Which truth are we talking about? The one that he said on air, or the one that he said in his emails and his text? Which truth?"
Right. I mean, Tucker Carlson clearly full well knew that the election wasn't a fraud, and yet he was giving voice to people like Sidney Powell, who were full-on not serious people who were doing real damage to democracy. And here's the thing: I think you and I, we may have a little bit different politics, but we both care about democracy, and we probably both come from a pretty similar place. And part of the reason why I joined the Lincoln Project and why I felt like as I had to leave the Republican Party and just be a conservative without a home is that the people that Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson are taking advantage of are really good, hardworking people, and they're just selling them. They're the medicine man back in the 1800s, showing up in town, offering bogus solutions to people who face real problems.
Yeah, but see, I'm at the point, Trigby, where they're not even offering solutions at this point. It's just division. It's just, it's the outrage candy that you talked about a moment ago.
Yeah.
It's not even real. I wish we were at a point where we were talking about policy and how we're going to move things forward. We got one party, the Republican Party, talking about how to take us backward, how to divide us, how to get us to hate each other. And you've got a Democratic Party that, I don't know, I think they're trying to find their way forward by, reshoring some manufacturing and investing in infrastructure and those things. I wish we were having those policy fights.
Yeah, and honestly, if we were having a serious conversation, I was on a flight. It's pretty funny. I was on a flight recently, and I sat down next to this guy, and we started a conversation. It was like a 6 a.m. flight, and it turns out he'd been a CEO of two of the biggest companies in America, and his plane was being fixed, but it turns out we started talking about manufacturing, And it was interesting because here's this guy, capitalist, and had been a CEO of these big companies, but he was talking about, and asking the question, why are we not manufacturing chips in the United States? And he's like, there's all kinds of stuff that we could be manufacturing in the United States, and it would make the United States more secure. Like there's things that we should be manufacturing that would be profitable, that would be good jobs for people, and would be making the country more safe.
Yeah, but this
wouldn't
isn't
be
new,
in
Triggy.
Taiwan where we're.
Yeah, none of this is new, though. I mean, I've been talking about this for all the years I've been doing this show. In fact, back in 2013, our friends over at the Alliance for American Manufacturing did a report on how desperate our military is, because a lot of the things that our military needs, we don't have the capacity to manufacture back in 2013. And it's only gotten worse since. I mean, I've been screaming about, hey, how about we reshore all the things? Let's just start with our military. If we're going to be a war society, at least make the stuff we need to get the planes to fly, the tanks to drive, the uniforms, all of that stuff. Start there if you have to.
We have been really short-sighted and sleeping. I mean, and you and I have talked a bunch of times.
I'm going to go greedy.
Well, I think we've been greedy. I think also, though, and you and I have talked a lot about Russia and Ukraine other times when I've been on. Like, I think we thought that we could take a hiatus from history, and I think you're right, and it's one of the things that you talk about. Both parties are a little bit are to blame in some degree for that happening.
Absolutely.
And
they sold us on the idea that we could all have corner office jobs. I lived through it. You don't need to take vote tech classes. Go to college, take on massive debt, invest in yourself, and you'll have that corner office job. We were sold that the only way to the middle class was with a college degree, because we were getting rid of all of those manufacturing jobs that supported families for years. So no wonder we are where we are, and no wonder we've got a generation of people who are so ticked off and angry that they're struggling, that they fall for the crap that's being thrown at them.
Yeah. And I know you're on in a bunch of stations in Wisconsin and on the Republican side, and you're seeing this nationally too. There's an attack on the attack on public schools is part of that. The attack on 2-year and vocational education, the kinds of things that actually build a solid middle class. What it does is it undermines what really has made America an exceptional place over a long period of time. America was at its best when it was making things, building things, doing things.
No, look, back in October, we did a tour. And we went all through Wisconsin. We went through Iowa. We went through Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan. We went all through what used to be the productive breadbasket of this country, where we made stuff. We went to the places that used to be. I went to Akron, used to be the rubber capital. Toledo used to be the glass capital. Eau Claire, Wisconsin used to be rubber. Iowa. We went to all of these places that used to be, and they're hollowed out because that manufacturing facility, that capacity, that pride is gone. And it wasn't that we lost it. Someone stole it. The greedy X stole it.
Yeah. I went to school in Eau Claire, and I was back there, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. And I had been in Eau Claire in 20 years. And that's a great example because the entire main street in downtown of Eau Claire has kind of been gutted out. The tire factory's gone. And quite honestly, even Cray Research, some of the tech stuff, gone. And, we need politicians who, regardless of what their party are, that are serious. And we have a whole lot of not serious, and we have a whole lot of carnival barkers like Tucker Carlson, who have been pushing incredibly not serious. And here's the thing is I know a lot of people are, at least on the left, I talk to people on the left who are excited. Well, Tucker Carlson's gone. That's great for democracy. Truth of the matter is somebody's going to come in and fill that void.
Yep, somebody will be.
And it might be worse. It might be worse because if his audience fractures, they're in a position where they can go to people who are speaking specifically to whatever grievance Tucker has groomed them for, and start pounding away on that. and it's gonna take them from being extremists to being radicalized.
Exactly, and that's why the story today. Newsmax saw their numbers jump because a big portion of Tucker's audience went to Newsmax, which I think is crazier than Fox. And there's one that's even crazier than Newsmax. So you're right. You're taking people who are already radicalized and making them even further to the fringe, and that's not good for. It's not good for democracy. It's not good for it's not good for communities.
Well, so from my work abroad, Rick, I have some experience and expertise in both extremism and radicalization, and radicalization occurs when people are given need. There's some threat to my values or my nation. Network, I'm part of a group of people, and narrative. And if you think about what and it's part of the reason why I started speaking out more publicly. If you think about what Donald Trump did on January 6th, the need, it's a fraud, come save America. Network, you're part of a group of patriots. And then he gave narrative. We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to fight like hell. And that's no different than anybody else who has attempted to radicalize people. Tucker Carlson was doing that nightly.
Yeah.
And somebody else is going to come along and fill that, and we need to figure out ways to speak honestly to those people. And quite honestly, the more they're fighting amongst themselves, the better off we are, because if they're fighting amongst themselves, they're not going to be fighting with us.
No, it's an excellent point. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Trygve Olsen, principal at Viking Strategies, also a senior advisor over at the Lincoln Project. We're seeing a lot of that radicalization happen on the trans issue. I mean, as I've said, it's a complex, way too complex of an issue to have to sloganeer and to do what we're doing. But it's all about dividing us and putting us into camps and giving that narrative that our children are under attack and we're going to rise up and fight for them. Because it's more about dividing than it's about solving any problems.
Well, so it's a little different than the trans issue, but it's another one that's along the same vein. So a really good friend of mine is a Chamber of Commerce member. The only Republican he's never voted for in his life is Donald Trump, right? So he's a Republican guy, although he probably wouldn't consider himself that anymore. He's president of a local school board back home in Wisconsin, and they have a book banning issue. There's a group of maybe, I don't know what they represent, but there's maybe like 500 of them that are showing up constantly at the school board. They ran a slate of pro-Trump, pro-American value candidates on this stuff. And they lost. They got clobbered. So recently they've been showing up at school board members' houses saying, you're not allowing debate on these books that we want banned, because they had a discussion about it. They held a vote and they were like, we're not banning these books. And so then their argument is, well, you're not allowing debate. And, he's calling me up. He's like, what do we do about them? I tried to tell him that we had a debate. It was called an election, where we won with 70% of the vote, and they don't want to hear it. They just want their way.
No, but are they part of that Moms for Liberty group? Because we've got a bunch of those nitwits in my neighborhood too.
Yes, he didn't say that, but that was the first thing that went through my mind. I'm sure they are. And so, it's all about, it's what these people are peddling is just trying to scare people. And, whether it's the trans issue or books or it is that constant search for what can we generate outrage around. And, the term for it, when it's used directly to try and create extremism, it's a Russian term, lesnaya informatsiya is what they use in that part of the world. And basically what they try and do is seed the grievance. So you throw out anything that somebody could have a grievance about, and you see what sticks, and then you amplify it.
Oh, they're good at that.
And they do that all the time.
Yep. They listen to right-wing talk radio or the F channel. So the question I have for you, and let's finish on this, because this is the important part. How do we fight back on that? How do people recognize what's being thrown out as just simply outrage candy, and then how do we spit it out? How do we fight back on this?
Well, with people that are in your immediate, I mean, really the hard part is they radicalize in bulk, and we have to help people one-on-one. You help them by listening, the people that you care about in your life who are succumbing to it, and you look for opportunities to create cognitive dissonance. In fact, I speak on this, and I do this whole thing about Kurt Cobain and that he's not really dead and he tore down the Soviet Union and lives in France. It's a real conspiracy theory, and I talk about it, and it's what you have to do is you have to find things that are incongruent. You're never going to lecture them to change, but you can find the things where how they live their life is very different from those simplistic answers that they're speaking.
Right,
and you
right.
have to, with the Kurt Cobain thing, I always talk about send Dave Grohl's book where he talks about it, right, as a Christmas gift, and then encourage the person to have a conversation about it. That's what you have to be able to find. You have to be able to find the examples that they can personalize to try and get them to see.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, Trigby, it's hard. I mean, when you hear the kind of
Terrible.
flat earther kind of talk, when you hear the JFK Jr. is coming back at Dealey Plaza to run for vice president, when you hear this stuff, it's so hard to take anyone seriously who has any of those beliefs.
Yeah, I mean it is, and honestly, one of the things that these kinds of actors, and it's what Putin's doing in Ukraine. Quite honestly, they want to keep going. They're going to keep going until you get worn out and no longer are willing to try, and that's what they want all of us to do.
Right.
You and I might have different politics. They want us to get tired of focusing on democracy and start fighting about other stuff and just give up. Because we just have to. It is hard. I mean, like everybody else in this era, but in my case, I wake up every day. How do I help try and keep Donald Trump from becoming president? I wish I could be doing something else. That gets tiring.
I'm right there with you. For me, as I say all the time, my North Star is how do we make working people's lives better? I wish we didn't have to have these baseline, fight these baseline fights of simple democracy and having elections matter. But here we are. Trigby, I appreciate the time. As always, incredible stuff. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Oh, absolutely, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend Trigby Olson. He is the principal over at Viking Strategies, also a senior advisor at the Lincoln Project. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break, right back to wrap things up. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. You have probably heard about the Red Scare, when thousands of people lost their jobs in the 1950s for allegedly harboring communist sympathies. But have you ever heard of the Lavender Scare that happened during those same years? Thousands of LGBT people lost their jobs due to discrimination. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1953. President Dwight David Eisenhower issued Executive Order 10450. The order declared that federal employees at all levels of government needed to be reliable, trustworthy, of good conduct and character, and of complete and unswerving loyalty to the United States. Later, the order listed reasons federal employees could be fired, including any criminal, infamous, dishonest, immoral, or notoriously disgraceful conduct, habitual use of intoxicants to excess, drug addiction, sexual perversion. That last item was widely understood as a euphemism for gay or lesbian activity. Major newspapers of the day often used the word perversion to refer to homosexuality. The argument was made that homosexual people were a potential threat to national security because foreign agents could blackmail them for information by threatening to reveal their sexual preferences. More than 1,400 federal employees lost their jobs within the first 4 months after President Eisenhower signed the executive order. This anti-homosexual discrimination extended beyond the federal government. Industries that relied on government contracts took the order as a cue to conduct similar purges. In 1957, World War II veteran and astronomer Dr. Frank Kameny was fired from the Army Map Service for being gay. After his firing, Dr. Kameny dedicated his life to leading the fight to end LGBT discrimination. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. One of my favorite bits today, Ron Johnson, Wisconsin senator, said, he doesn't get why no one cares about climate change. Doesn't care because we're not Africa. We're not going to be the ones who suffer the worst of it right now. Doesn't matter to us. In fact, he thinks, Wisconsin could use a little less snow. Yeah, that's coming from a U.S. senator. And you wonder why people think the future is so screwed up, that you wonder why young people are flipping out. Because you've got senators saying dumb stuff. That's almost as dumb as the Inhofe thing going, here, climate change doesn't exist because I got a snowball in my hand. Wow. Wow. I mean, just mind-blowing. But again, the things, the hey, look at me that you see coming out of the right, the attention-seeking, the mommy didn't love me enough, I guess, kind of stuff is mind-blowing. And I look at Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley said that Biden's likely to die in 5 years. He announced he's running. I think that we can be very clear and say with a matter of fact, if you vote for Joe Biden, you are counting on President Harris, because the idea that he would make it till 86 is not something I think is likely. And that's going to be what the Republicans run on. We're hoping Joe dies. And then the next part of this, is the racial component. It's all going to be about Kamala. It's all going to be about her. That's what their scheme is. For me, the reality, it's the policies that I'm voting for right now. And I've always voted for policies. I've always voted on issues. And right now, the Republicans have shown me they have no policy chops. There's nothing there. I like what Biden's done so far. And I don't care that he can't get a sentence out. It's the policy. That to me is important. Do I like every policy? No. But there are some really important ones. The manufacturing, the infrastructure. Look, we've been talking about those things for years. I've been literally talking about infrastructure and manufacturing for all 18 years of doing this show. It was one of the first topics that I brought up from the Labor Day of 2005. It was one of the first things. We need jobs. We need to rebuild and create the infrastructure of the future. And we haven't done it in a way that really matters. And look, even with the money that Biden did get, the $1 trillion plus, it's not enough. Not close. We need multiples of that. But do you think, given the fact that we've got a Republican Party who's saying, hey, we're going to cut all government functions by 22%. We're going to slash and burn. We're going to drag that baby into the bathtub and drown it. You think we're going to get that kind of investment in the future? Because unlike a lot of people, I think about what we're going to leave to the next generation, because I think about what my grandparents' generation left for us. The kind of investments, the kind of institutions, the kind of opportunities, the kind of future. And I want that for my kids. Is that too much to ask, do you think? Is that too crazy? I don't think so. And look, the majority of people I know feel the same way. This is something we can agree on. See how easy that is? It's that simple. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Stitcher to iTunes, Podbean, all of those places, iHeart, everywhere in between. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.